So yeah, I'm going to create another folder in CSS folder, and in this folder I'm going to come to CSS folder here. I'll come to CSS folder. You can see the highlight is on CSS folder. Then I'm going to right click and click on new file, and I'm going to call it weekly class 1. So here we're going to have a new file. I'm going to call it index.html, and here we are going to have star.css. So every other ones that I have here, let me just remove them. So I generate my boilerplate. So all of this process, you already know them. CSS class. Link my CSS. Alright, good. So now we're going to look at absolute and relative measurement. Absolute and relative measurement. That is what we are going to look at now. What exactly is absolute and relative unit? Because every measuring thing should have a unit of measurement. So in CSS, every property like padding, margin, height, value, font size, every CSS property that necessitates you use a unit, that necessitates you use a unit, or that necessitates a value, requires what? A unit. So every property like margin, padding, height, width, font size in CSS that has some dimensions or height needs what? A unit. So CSS provides us with a lot of units, some of whose values are fixed, and while others whose values are relative to other values. Values like that of the parent, or to the default value or for the particular HTML element. So let's look at absolute unit. Let's look at absolute unit. Absolute unit. What exactly is absolute unit? Now, absolute units are units whose values are fixed, respective or irrespective of any other factor like parent element or viewing windows. The screen size won't affect the size of the element. So this unit has a fixed value irrespective of any other factor. Let's say, for example, I have a div. And I call that div a class of box. Then I come to my CSS. Let's say I do my CSS reset and I do margin. I don't think this one should be strange to you. Margin is 0. Then box sizing. I said I was going to explain this box sizing to you. Border box. I will do that before we end the class. So I select my div that has a class of box. Div that has a class of box. I'm going to select it, and to select a class, you need the period, then the name of the class. So I'm going to give this a width. Let's say a width of 500 pixel, or let's say 800 pixel. A width of 800 pixel and a height of 400 pixel. Let me just give it a background color so I can be able to see the dimension of the box. So I can give it red color. So sorry, let me come to my HTML and open with Live Server. So this is what I have here. This is what I have here. Can you see? If I reduce this, for instance, if I reduce the screen size, notice what happens here. You will see, can you see? You will see this horizontal scroll bar. You will see this horizontal scroll bar here, showing the dimension of what? Of the box. The dimension of this box is 800 by 400, meaning 800 pixel wide and 400 pixel long. So if you look at this now, this kind of box is not relative, but it is fixed. So it is fixed. It is what? Fixed. The value of this box is what? Fixed. And it as though it is fixed irrespective of any other factors like parent element. Normally, as we are resizing this element, for example, as we are resizing the window, this browser, as we are resizing the window, the size of the box to also resize to be able to fit the size of the window or of this browser window. The size of the box should be able to adjust or be resized to be able to what? Fit in to the browser window. But no, it doesn't. The width or the value that we set for the width and the height of this box remains constant, remains fixed, irrespective of the size of the browser window. So you can see that we have what? This horizontal bar to show you the limits or the extent of what? The extent of this box. So if we keep reducing this, for instance, you can see, but that is not what we want. So now the reason why we have this fixed box is because of what? The unit, which is what? Pixel. So pixel is a fixed unit. It falls under absolute unit. There are a lot of absolute units that we have, but the one that is best used in website or in the web is what? Pixel. We have centimeter, we have pica, yes, we have pica, we have millimeter, we have a lot of them that falls under what? Absolute unit. But the ones that, aside from pixel, the rest of the absolute unit actually is good for printing. It is good for printing. It is good for printing. It is good for printing. The one that is appropriate for web is the pixel. But the rest, which is point, pica, centimeter, and millimeter, they are actually used for printing. They are used for printing documents and all that. But the measurement that we use, the absolute unit that we use for web is what? Is pixel. it is pixel. It is pixel. So pixel, which is px, px stands for pixel, and pixel can be defined as 1/96th part of an inch. 1/96th part of an inch. Let me write that here. Pixel stands for, or it is what? Pixel, that's what it stands for. And it is defined as 1/96th part of an inch. So this is it here. That's pixel. So pixel is used for web. And let us look at where pixel is actually important. Where pixel is actually important. We want to look at where pixel is actually important. Pixel is actually important when you want to set the logo of your website. When you want to set the logo of your website, maybe you want the logo of your website to remain in the same dimension. However, irrespective of the size of the window, you want your logo to remain the same size, the same dimension. So even though you keep reducing this window, or you keep reducing the browser window, you want your logo to remain at that same size. That is when you use what? Pixel. It doesn't mean that using pixel for other CSS properties like margin, padding, and what they call it, padding, margin, font size, and other CSS property that requires unit. If you use pixel for it, doesn't mean that it's not going to work, but it's just that those measurements or those values are going to be fixed. They are not going to be relative to anything. So it's going to be what? Fixed. So in such case, the only time you use pixel, you use it for logo, where you want your logo of your website to remain in the same dimension, to have that same dimension, respective of the size of what? Of the screen. The size of the screen. That is when you use pixel. That's when you use pixel. Please hold on. So it is not actually appropriate to use pixel in font size. Let's say, for instance, let me come here. Let's say, for instance, let me comment this part here, and let me have a paragraph, and I call this paragraph, let me give it the content. Let me just say Lorem 10. She's going to generate 10 words for me. And I come to this part here and I call the p tag, and I say p tag, I want to give it a font size of by default the font size of a paragraph is 16. By default the font size of a paragraph is 16. So let's say I want to give it a font size of 40 pixel. A font size of 40 pixel, and I save. This is what we have. Can you see? So let us see. Then let us change the settings of our, or let's say, for example, okay, let us change the settings. Let us look for the settings and let us change is the appearance now. This, yeah, let me look for appearance. I'm coming. Yes, font size. If I make it very small and I come to this part here, can you see that it is still fixed? Lorem Ipsum, you can see it is still fixed. The same value that we gave it is still fixed. So it is not appropriate. So we gave this paragraph a fixed value of what? 40 pixel. And the reason why it is fixed is because of the absolute unit there, which is pixel. So even though I reduce the font size to be very small, it's not going to be small here. Can you see it? It's not going to be small there. And even though I make it very large, it's not going to be what? Very large. Can you see? It's just going to remain as this. It's going to remain as this. So this is not actually appropriate, because you want something that once the user of your website comes to his settings, maybe goes to his settings in his browser and wants to reduce the font size, he wants to reduce the font size of the browser, then let your website, the font size of a website, also respond, or let it respond based on the font size settings that the user sets on his browser. So with Pixel, that cannot happen, because Pixel is going to be fixed irrespective of what you do to it. It's going to be fixed. That is why it is advisable to use Pixel when you want to have the same dimension all through in your website, such as logo, and also in the place whereby Pixel also will not be that noticeable. Maybe you want to give a border, the thickness of the border, maybe you want to give it 1 pixel or 2 pixel. Those ones too, you can use Pixel for that. Do you get it now? So that is that. Now imagine let us look at the relative value for this. Let us observe relative value for relative unit that we can use for Pixel. Relative value that we can use in the place of Pixel. Relative value that we can use in the place of Pixel. So, or relative unit, sorry. Relative unit that we can use in the place of Pixel. Now, relative units are relative to some other length property, like the parent element font size or the size of the viewport. The size of the viewport, relative. The size of the viewport. So we are going to look at one relative unit. In this case, we are going to look at rem. We are going to look at rem as one of the relative units that we can use in the place of what? Pixel for font size. So what does rem stands for? Let's come here. What does rem stands for? Rem stands for root hem. Rem stands for root hem, and it means that this rem is talking about the root font size. The root what? Font size. It's talking about the base, the root default, the default or the root value for a particular element. For a particular element. So let's say, for example, this root is talking about the HTML root, the HTML default value, the HTML default value. So the HTML default value for font size is 16 pixel. The HTML default value for font size is 15 pixel. So if we come here now, for example, and we set HTML, we set HTML font size. We set HTML font size to be let's say 10 pixel. If we set HTML font size to be 10 pixel, meanwhile the default font size is 16 pixel. Now we are setting the root, which is the HTML. We are setting the font size to be what? 10 pixel. So in our paragraph text, that if we say forem, what does forem signifies? Forem signifies that this forem signifies 40 pixel, because this rem is a root font size, and the root is HTML, and we have set the root by ourselves to be what? 10 pixel. Because if we don't set it by ourselves, it has a default value. The HTML has a default value for font size, which is what? 16 pixel. So if we don't set it, and the default value is 16 pixel, and we say 4 rem, so we are trying to say 4 times 16. That is what it means. So that is say 4 times 16, and 4 times 16 is what? 4 times 16. 4 times 16, I think should be I can't. What's 4 times 16? I can't remember now. I think 48, right?
64.
It should be 48 now.
64.
64. Okay, thank you. 64. 4 times 16 is 64 pixel. So can you see it now? That is what it means, because that root, which is root m, is talking about the root, the value, the font size value of, or the value of your HTML element, which is what? 16 pixel by default. 16 pixel by default. So when you say 4 rem, you are saying 4 times 16. But if you set it, for example, to, if you set the default value to 10 pixel and you say 4 rem, you are trying to say 4 times 10, because this is going to be relative to what? The font size that you set to the HTML. So you are saying 4 times 10, that's going to be what? 440. So this is now 4 times 10, that's going to be 40. And if we save, we can even increase it to 6 rem. So say 6 rem, 4 times 10, if 6 times 10, that will be 60. So can you see? And also, if we make this very small, and let us see here, it is still the same thing. It is still the same thing. Then how can we make this to be relative? Now it is very simple. By default, to make this to be relative, you don't have to set it to 10 pixel, because even this pixel on its own is an absolute value. They will need to set a relative unit to this value instead of this pixel. So for us to be able to get an equivalent of 10 pixel in percentage, for us to be able to get an equivalent of 10 pixel in percentage, we are going to use 62.5%. So what you are trying to say is this: you want the font size of your element to be relative to what? To the default font size that you set in your HTML. So this will be relative to 62.5 pixel, 62.5 percentage. So now if you view this on your browser now, let us see this. Now watch. We make this very small. Let's make this very large now. If we come here, can you see that when we made this very large, when we made this very large for the font size, when we made the font size very large, what we did is it affected the size of what? Of the text. And when we made it very small, it affected the size of the text. Now you can see that the text now is relative, or it is relative to the font size that you set in your browser. And the reason why it is so, it is because of what? This HTML root that we set the font size to 62.5 percentage. So if I say 6 rem, I'm saying 60 times 10. That is what? 60 pixel. Because this 62.5 percentage is equivalent to what? 10%. So now, what this simply means is this. Just pay attention. If probably the medium size is, this is the recommended one. The medium size, this is the recommended one. Let's say the medium size is 10 pixel or 16 pixel. Let's say the medium size for this font size is 10 pixel. So we are going to say, or 16 pixel, or let's say 10 pixel. 10 pixel, that's the medium size. So it's going to check 10 pixel relative to this root folder, this root size here. That is this 10 pixel relative to this. And if we set the font size to 6 pixel, it's going to, okay, let's say for example, just hold on now. Let's say if I increase this to very large. Let's say the pixel of this very large is 32. Let's say the pixel of this very large is 32 or maybe 48. Very large. So we now say, okay, very large that we have set in our browser, 48 pixel, compared to this. So it's going to be like it's going to be like this. It's going to be, just watch, it's going to be like this: 62.5 over 100, then times what? 48 pixel. So 48, that is what will determine the overall pixel that we are going to get. It's going to determine the overall pixel, and that is what we are going to use to determine what we are going to have here. So if in the browser, maybe you set it to very small, and very small is like 10 pixel or 8 pixel or 5 pixel, for example, 5 pixels. So it's going to be 5 pixel of this 62.5. So whatever you get as the result, that is what is going to be the RAM. So it's going to be 6 times the result. That's going to be the RAM. So do you get it now? So that is that actually. That is that. So you usually, so in practicality, whenever you want your font size to be relative, you need to use what? You need to come to the styling and set the HTML font size to be 62.5%. Then you can now start using what? RAM. So do you get it now? So that's that. That is that about that. So let us look at percentage. So I'm going to awaken this box now. We are going to look at percentage. Let us see percentage. Percentage is also an absolute what? It's an absolute value, and percentage absolute unit, it is relative to the parent element, to the value of the parent element, whether to the parent element or to the, yes, it is relative to the parent element. Yes, percentage is relative to the parent element or to the viewing window. Let me use that word. That's for percentage, relative to, where is it now? Percentage, where is it? Percentage is relative to parent element or viewing window. That is the browser window. So let's say, for example, instead of setting this width to 800 pixel, I'm going to set it to like 60%. I'm going to set it to 60%, and probably the height to be 40%. Do you get it now? So the highest percentage is 100%. So we want to set it to 60%, and let us see what we have. So I'm just going to remove this. I don't need this anymore. I'm coming. Why is it not showing? I'm just going to open this again. Why is it not showing? D with a box. Percentage, background color. Okay. Okay, I get. Let's say I'm coming. Let's say we set the body. We set the body to be width of 100% because it's going to be relative to the body. Let's see. Still not giving us what we want. Okay, so this is what we are going to do. Let me remove. Okay, so the percentage actually is relative to a parent element. So I need the parent element, not the viewing window. It's relative to the parent element, not to viewing window. So for example, I'm going to have a div inside of here. and I'm going to call it div dot. So if you want to generate a class with a div, if you want to generate a class automatically without getting the element first then the class, just a div dot inner box. So it's going to generate a class of div. It's just going to generate a div with a class of what? Inner box. Then the next thing we are going to do is we are going to come here and we are going to start inner box. We didn't forget to put a period here. Inner box. And let's say I'm going to set this to cut it. I'm going to set this. I'm going to set this here. I'm going to cut this one too, and I'm going to set it here. So for this box, I'm going to give it a width. Let's say width of should I call it a width of, or a width of 800 pixel, and the height of 500 pixel. Then the background color of aqua. Let's just use this one. So if we save, yes, this is what we have. Can you see now that if you can you see this now? Okay, let me increase this to, instead of 60 pixel, let me make it, instead of 60%, let me make it 80%, and let me make this 50. So if we save, this is what we have. So this inner box is relative to what? To the outer box, which is the parent box. So the inner box is 80% of the value of the outer box, while also the inner box is 50% of the height of the outer box. So if I reduce this, for instance, just watch, if I reduce this for instance, I'm coming, why is it giving me, hold on. Alright, so I just made a little adjustment. I removed the inner box inside of the box div. Then I comment the CSS property for that. Then I set the box to be width of 80%, height of 50%, then background color to be aqua. Then the body. So the body is talking about the entire viewing window, the viewport. Talking about the viewport, what you can see, that's the viewport window. So the entire viewport, we gave it a width of 8 we gave it a width of 100 view width. So 100 view width. So it's going to cover the entire skip, the entire viewport width. So when we use 100 view W, it means that you are covering the entire viewport width. So, and the height too, we want it to cover the entire viewport height. So that you can see the color is covering the entire width and the entire height of the viewing window. So this view window, what you can see here is called viewport. So we are not saying that we want an element that is inside of this body here to be relative to the viewport of the body. So we say Windows, we want the box to be 80% of the viewport and the height to be 50% of the viewport. So now if we keep resizing this now, the moment we resize this, as we resize this one is adjusting accordingly. As we are resizing, it is adjusting accordingly. It will keep adjusting. Can you see? It will keep adjusting and it will still remain, this box will still remain 80% of this, and the height will remain 50% of what? The viewport. So you can see that percentage is relative. It can use to build responsive website. It can be used to build responsive website. So that is percentage, and we are going to look at, and we are going to use it or use it in our project so that you can see the use case of what percentage. And not just that, let's say we give this width, let's bring this back. Let's bring this back now, and I'm going to use something like, let me comment the body, and now I'm going to uncomment this. So here I'm going to change this to, like, let's say this is going to be, it's not going to be width, it's going to be max width. Let me give it max width. So say max width to be 600 pixel, or let's say 700 pixel, and height to be I don't think I really need height. Let me just put height 400 pixel, or max height. Yes, let me use max height 400 pixel, and I want the height of this to be what? Relative. So I want the width of this box to be relative to this, and the height of this to be relative to this. So let us see what we have. It's still not giving me what I want. Why is this so? Please hold on. Box, inner box. Max width 700 pixel, 400 pixel. Let's see if I do. Let me comment this. Let me remove this max. Save. Okay, I think it's bringing it out now. I don't know why it's not bringing it out with max. Max width. Let me see. Let me try it again. Let's see if it's going to work. Okay, I think it worked. Then max height. Let's see if it's going to work. Okay. Didn't work. Okay. For the width, it is working, but it's not working for the height. So I'm just going to uncomment this, then let's see what we have. Yeah, good. So you can see that the inner div is 80% of the parent div. So if we resize this, for instance, if you resize this, you can see it will still remain. Can you see? It will still remain. It will still remain 80% of what? The parent div. It will remain 80% of the parent div. And the reason is because we use percentage as what? A unit. We use what? Percentage as a unit. We use percentage as a unit. And that's very, very good. So that's that. That's that about this HTML, this measuring unit. Okay, we are going to also look at what they call it, viewport and view height. Of course, we've looked at it. So view width takes the full width of your browser, the viewing port of your browser, while view height takes the full height of the viewing port of your browser. So these units, they are relative unit, and they are used to build responsive, or they are part of the things that part of the properties or things that makes a website to be what? Responsive. That makes a website to be responsive. Okay, all right, please. Now that's that about relative measurement, and I think we also have hem too as a relative measurement. We have M, which stands for hem. stands for capital letter M. So it has a font size of 16 pixels. So this M is very interesting in the sense that, let's say for example, this M is also relative to the parent element. It is used for font size actually. You can also use it for width. You can also use it for width, but it's used for font size. You can use it to set the value, the unit value of a width, but you can use it for, it is mostly used for font size. So let's say for example, let's say you wrap this let's say you have a div now. Let me uncomment this, and I'm going to have a div, and I'll call it text wrapper. I'll call it text wrapper, and inside of this text wrapper I'm going to put my paragraph. So I come here, then I select text wrapper. I say dot text wrapper, or before I even set anything for text wrapper, for instance, I'm going to come here. Let's say I want the font size to be 2M. If I set the font size to be 2M, you know, mind you, 2M is going to be 2 times 10 pixel, because we have already set the font size of the HTML root to be what, 10 pixel, using this what, 62.5%. So if we save now, you can see lorem ipsum is 2M, blah blah blah. You can see the font size is 2M, meaning 2 times this value here, which is 10 pixels. So if this value is equivalent to 10 pixels, it's going to be 2 times what, 10 pixel. So that's 20 pixel. But imagine if we now set, for example, if we set the font size of the parent container, that means this wrapper is called parent. This wrapper is the container of this paragraph, so this is called parent, and this paragraph is the children. The div that is holding this paragraph is the parent, and the paragraph itself is what, the child. So if we say we want to set the font size of the parent to, let's say 2M for instance, it will set it to 2M for instance. If we set it to 2M for instance, I will set this one to 1M for instance. You'll be wondering, let us observe. You'll be wondering if this is 1M, because let me uncomment this and let me show you something. So by default this is 1M. So 1M is like 10 pixels based on that root font size that we set. Can you see this is 1M? And now if I now uncomment this now, and we set the parent element to be what, 2M, so 2M will be 20 pixels. So the font size of this paragraph, which is a child of this container, is going to make this font size is default. It's going to be relative to the font size of the parent element. So 1M is going to be relative to this. So 1M will now be, if I save this now and I comment, can you see now? So 1M has now turned what? This 1M is now what? 2M. I don't know if you understand me. Like if you are using M is always relative to the font, the value that you set for the parent element. So if the value that you set here for the parent container is what, 2M, the parent element 2M. So this one is going to be relative to what, 2M. So if I set this font size now to be 2M now, so this one now will be 2 times this font size that we set to the parent. And let us see it. Can you see? So if I set this one to 3M, for example, this 3M will be 3 times of what, this font size. Let us see. Can you see? So that's how it is. So whenever you are using M, the child element will be relative to this. So when we set the child element to 3M, we are trying to say we want this 3M to be 3 times of the font size of what, the parent font size. So that is that. That is that. So we are done with absolute and relative what, units. And let us see in practical how we can use these things. So I'm just going to comment this, for example. Then I'm also going to comment all of this. I don't need this anymore. So let us work with image, because here what we have here is styling what? Images. Styling images. Styling images. So we want to look at images. So we're going to come here. I'm just going to pick cat image. Where is that my fine cat? That cat, I think is this one. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to copy the image address. So this one is not something that is new to you. We've already done that. Come in. Alright, so I'm going to have like a div. I want to show you something now. Next, I'm going to have a div. Inside of the div, I'm going to call this div class of what? Container. Then I'm going to say something like I'm going to do image, and I'm going to copy the style here. I'm going to come, I'm going to say cat image as the alternate text. Cat image. Then here I'm going to have a description. So I'm going to call it div, and give it a class of description. So inside of this div, I'm going to have a paragraph, and I'm going to call it ORM 30. Then I save. So if we view this on the browser, if you view this, what is the problem? If you view this on the browser, this is what we have. So this is what we have so far. So this is what we have. So what I'm going to do is, then we can start styling. Let's say, for example, for this container here, I'm going to give it probably a dot container. I'm going to give it a width, or let me give it a width of 500 pixel, or let's say a width of 300 pixel, and the height of 500, or yes, let's say 500 pixel. We save. Let's say we give it a background color of gray. So let's say CCC. So let's see what we have. So you can't see the background color, but let's make it red. Let's make it red. I'm coming. Alright, so make it red, but the thing is that you can't see the background color and this here. The reason is because of this image. The image is too big, that's why I can't see the background color of the container. So we have to come here and set the image. We're going to say img. We're going to give it a width of, let's say width of so this is what we are going to do now. For us to make sure that this image is responsive, like I want the image that is inside of this container, this image here that is inside of this container, to be relative to the height of this container. I want this image, the size of this image, to be relative to the size of this container. And of course, we already know what we can do. Percentage is a relative unit. So for us to make image to be relative to the width of this container, and meanwhile the width of the container is what, 300 pixels, and I want the image to cover the entire 300 pixels. I want the image to cover the entire width of this container. So for me to make this image cover the entire width of this container, I don't have to set the width to be 300 pixels again. I just have to set it to be what, 100% or 100%. So if I set it to 100% for instance, and let us see what we have here. Can you see? It is now what, relative to the size of the container. Can you see it? It is relative to the size of the container. Relative to the size of the container. Very simple. Then I can now start my text. I can come here. I can do p tag now. So now this will lead me to another type of CSS selector that is called descendant selector. It is called descendant selector. Descendant selector. Descendant selector. Let me just use that one. Descendant selector. Descendant selector. So let's say for example you want to select this P, and you only want to select the P that is inside of this container. You want to select the P, or you want to select the P that is inside of description. The P that is inside of description. What are you going to do? First of all, you select the description. Then to select this P, to select the P that is inside of description, all you just have to do is to select the description, then space, then P, then you are good to go. So if I hover on this now, it's showing me that this P is inside of this element that has a class of what? Descript. So can you see it now? So that's it. So this is a what? Descendant selector. Descendant selector simply means that you can select from your parent, from your parent element, select an element that is not even direct. You can select an element that the help of this descendant selector is such that you can select an element that is not a direct child to a parent element. So let's say for example you want to select this P tag now. I know that P is not a direct child to this container, but is like a grandchild to this container. You can use descendant selector. You can use descendant selector. You can just say okay, dot, instead of using dot descript, you can use dot container then P. So if you hover on this now, you can see here that this P is inside of an element that is inside of this container. So obviously we can use descendant selector. So descendant selector helps in selecting an element that is not even a direct child to a parent container. So it can be actually the grandchild or the great grandchild of that container, but you can use descendant selector to select it. It's as simple as that. Very, very simple. So that's that. And there's also what we call the is it sibling selector now? No, it is child selector. There's also what we call child selector. Child selector. We are going to look at sibling selector later, but let us look at child what selector. Child selector. Now this child selector is talking about the direct child of an element. So the direct child of an element. Let's say for example, I want to select this image now. Let me come here and do it here. Let me cut it and do it here. I want to select this image. This image. I know that this container has two children. This container has two children. This container has two children, two children, and the children are image and what, this div with a class of descript, this div here. So it has two children. This container has two children. When I mean children, I mean the direct children of this container. That means the immediate element that is inside of this container. So we have what, image and what, this description. This p tag is not a child of container, it's actually the grandchild, because this is a nested element, meaning that this p is a direct child of this descript div, and this descript div is a direct child of container. So if you want to select child, if you want to select element, if you want to use a child selector to select a child element of a parent container, parent element. Now in this case, this image is a child element of this container. So what we are going to do is we are going to do something like this: dot container, then greater than sign, then image. So if I over on this image now, you will see that you can see, you are seeing select container and what, image. So what we are trying to say is that this image is a direct child of what, container. It's a direct child of container. Why this one is what, descendant selector, meaning that we can select an element that is not a direct child to what, this container, but like a descendant of what, this container. So we can use this descendant selector, and what is it, just a space, that's all. So yeah, I'm going to give it a font size, of, let's say, 3lem. So 3lem is relative to this one here, so it's going to be 30. So if I save, it's like it's very big. So let me make it 2rem. Okay, 2rem. I think 2rem is better. Can you see? So very beautiful. So we are able to make sure that this image adjusts to what, to the size of what, of the container, using what, percentage. So I can change the color of this container to the color that I want. Maybe I can give it probably a powder blue. Can you see? Very interesting. So that's that. And also, let's say for example, because there are still some things we need to learn in for image, if this where we are even going to, let me see, because after the image we are going to look at we are going to look at gradients, or okay, we're going to look at gradient and background image, and wherever we stop, we'll stop. So in this case now, look at what we have. Very interesting. This is what we have so far, but I also want to show you more examples on how to style images. So let's say under this now, I have another class. I have another container, and I call it image container. And inside of this image container, I'm going to select another image. Let me call this probably female model image. Let me use this. address. Let me use this. Copy this image address. Then we'll come here and then we'll do img. Paste this source here. Then the same thing, we come here and do img, as in female model image. We save. Then let us comment this so that we will not have double things here. Can you see? I'm just going to comment this. So let me just comment this. Let me comment this. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to set the image container. Image container. That's the name of the container, the class name of the container we give to div. So I'm going to give it a width. Let's say a width of 400 pixel, and let's say a height of 400 pixel. So if we save, if we come here, notice thing change, because what, the container is, the image is bigger than the container. So we want to restrict the width of the container. We want to restrict or resize the image, the size. We want to resize the size of the container, of the image, to fit into the size of the word container. And to do that, we're going to say .img, then img. So what this simply means is we are trying to select what image that is inside of img container. So of course I taught you that. So we are going to say width to be 100%. So the size of this container, the size of this width, or the width, sorry, this width size of this image is going to be 100% of the width size of this image container. So if I save, can you see? Beautiful. Then for the height too, I'm going to set the height to be what, 100%. Can you see? Let me show you that. Can you see it's 100%? Because now initially, let me use a margin so that I can show you something. Margin, let me do like 3% from the top, then auto left and right, then 0 top bottom. So this is what we have here now. Let's say I had not had the height. Let's say I had not had the height. I make the width to be 100%. So it's only the width that's going to be 100%, but the height is going to be the same. You can see that the thing is still clear. You still have this beautiful lady, very clear. But the reason is because we only adjusted the width of the image to be 100% of the width of the container, but we did not adjust the height. So it's going to shoot, the height is going to, so this, the height of this image is going to be bigger than the height of the container. And let us see that, let us observe that. We are going to inspect. So now this is the image container. Can you see the image container? This is the image container. This, the one I highlighted on it, you can see what you are having here. This is the height. This is the height of the container. This is the height of the container, and this is the image. Can you see the image? Can you see the height of the image? The height of the image. This is the height of the container, and this is the height of the image. So can you see? So we want to make sure that the image, the height of the image, is adjusted based on the height of the what? Container. So if I do that now, it's going to make this kind of, it's going to make this, it's going to distort the dimension of this, because by default, can you see, that means some part of this image is being abstracted or extracted. Can you see? This is not what we want. We want it to still be like this, to still be fine like this, but it's just that apparently we have forced the image to be we have forced the image to be responsive to the width and the height of its container. So it's now 100% width of its container and 100% height of its container. So that's why we have this kind of picture. And this is not what we want. It's very blur. Or is it blur now? It's like it's feel. It's like a feel. It feels the container. That's not what we want. So we can change this by using object fit. There's what they call object fit in CSS. This actually helps us to be able to readjust the image. Let's say, for example, object fit, do you want it to contain? If you want it to contain, this is what it means here. Can you see? Very beautiful. Very beautiful. So now this object fit property defines how an element responds to the height and to the width of its content box. So it defines how an element responds to the height and the width of its content box. And this element that we are talking about here is the image. So it defines how this image element responds to the height and the width of its what? Content box. And the content box is this image what? Container here. So if we use object fit, it lets us to crop an inline image by giving us a fine grain control over how it is squished and stretched inside its what? Box. So now in this case, we are going to look at let's look at 3 values that we can set for object fit. 3 values that we can set for what? Object fit. So the default value is what? Fill. The default value is fill. Let's look at it. The default value is fill. So, and this fill, it stretches the image to fit the content box. You can see how it is being stretched. It stretches it, and that is why it doesn't make the look to be nice. So it stretches the image to fit the content box regardless of its aspect ratio. Aspect ratio, talking about the dimension of the image. So regardless of its aspect ratio, can you see how stretched it is? But let us look at contain. What exactly is contain? Contain increases or decreases the size of the image to fit the box while preserving its aspect ratio. So I'm going to say contain. For example, contain. So you can see that this image now is containing this content box, and yet the aspect ratio is being preserved, meaning its original dimension is being preserved. Can you see how it is? But if I use cover, for example, as a value for object fit, now this cover, the image will fill the height and the width of its box, once again maintaining its aspect ratio, but often cropping image in the process. So let's say, for example, I want it to be what? Cover, and I say cover. Can you see that some part of the image has been what? Cut out. Some part of the image has been cut out. You can't see the bottom, you can't see the sides. So it means that it's still going to preserve the aspect ratio, but it's just that it's going to cut out some part of the image. That is the cover, and more on cover when we look at background image later. So in this case now, we are going to use what? Contain, so that we're still going to maintain what? The aspect ratio, and it's still going to fill the box. It's still going to fill the box of, can you see? This is what we did here. Very beautiful. Because without this object fit, if we comment this now, without this object fit, this thing is going to look very stretched. Very stretched. So, in fact, let me give the background image, the background container, a background color. Sorry, the container image, a background color of red. So let's see. It's covering it like this. Is what we are talking about. And if I comment the object fit and I change it to contain, can you see? Can you see this now? It means that the contain increases or decreases the size of the image. So it will decrease the size or increase the size of the image to fit or to fill, yes, to fill the box while preserving its aspect ratio. While preserving its aspect ratio. While preserving its aspect ratio. So that is for contain. That is actually for contain. So when we are talking about aspect ratio, we are talking about the height and the width of an element. The height and the width of what? An element. The height and the width of an element. That's what we are talking about, aspect ratio. So you can see for this contain, now in this case it didn't increase the image, it decreases the image so that it can fill the box while it preserves what is aspect ratio. So this kind of image, you can see that this value cover, the value contained in the object fit, you can see that it didn't cover the entire box. It did not cover the entire box. It reduces the image so that it can fill the box and still preserve its aspect ratio. That is for contain. Now if I remove this now and I use cover, so cover is going to cover the entire content box. That's the image container, even though it's going to crop out some part of the image, but the aspect ratio will be what? Preserved. It will still maintain the aspect ratio, even though it's going to cut out some things. So that is that about object fit. So when we start building website, you will see a lot of use cases on this object fit. So let us look at other things too as well. What can we look at? I said we are going to do form styling. So let us look at form styling, and we can then wherever we stop, if we still have time, we can continue. So let us look at form styling. So I'm just going to remove, no, should I remove this or let me just maintain it? Let me maintain it. I'm going to create another file here. I'm going to call it form.html, and I'm going to create another file. I'm going to call it form.css. So let me remove this. So I'm going to create a form. So yeah, I'll call it styling form as the title, and I'm going to link the CSS. So this will no longer be style.css. It's not going to be style.css. It's going to be form.css. So I'm going to change it to form.css. So I'm going to create a form. Let's say a login form. So I'm going to have a div, and I'm going to say login form container. That will be the class name. So I'm going to have an h2. It's going to be login to get started. So yeah, I'm going to have a form element. So I don't want this action attribute. This action attribute is for back end, and in this form I'm going to have like I'm going to have a div. I'm going to have call it input. What should I call it now? Okay, once I get the right name, I'll call it that. So I'll say label So label, I want okay, to log in, that will be okay, login to get, okay, so I'll say username. So yeah, I'm going to say input with a type of text. Yeah, so I don't need the for, so I'll create another div. So I'll say label, I'll call this password. And I'm going to call this impute with a type of password. So if we save this and we view this in the browser, so this is what we have. We view this in the browser, this is what we have. So let us start styling. So I'm going to say font size. I'm going to select the margin to be 0 and the padding to be 0. So we are also going to use box sizing, border box, border box. So you may want to ask, what is the meaning of this box sizing? What's the meaning of this box sizing? So box sizing in CSS is a property that allows you to control how an element's total width and height is calculated. By default, the width and the height property include only the content area, excluding the padding and the border. However, now with box sizing, you can change this behavior to include padding and border in the total dimension of what? Of the element. So let me quickly explain this padding, this box sizing, border box. So actually the box sizing has two values, and the value are content box and border box. Content box and border box. So let me use a paragraph, or let me use a div. Let me use it and call it box. Let me say box sizing, or box, yes. Let me use box sizing. Then I'm going to come here, I'm going to style dot box sizing, box sizing. Let's say, let me comment this now. Box sizing, I'm going to say, I'm going to give it a width of I just want to use this as an example, a width of 300 pixel and the height of 300 pixel. Let me just make it 200.